Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Royalty Exchange Investor Office Hours webinar Q&A session. We are go ahead and getting started right now. I've noticed that folks that register for these events usually log in right on time. And as I'm looking at everyone basically chiming in through Zoom here, I see that is the case again today. So rather than artificially wait or pause the event, we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, Royalty Exchange office hours, we hold these every month to allow all of our investors to ask any questions that you might have, both those of you that might have just signed up within the recent weeks, as well as those who have been here for years. We'll answer any questions that you might have related to royalties, how music royalties work, how music royalty investing works, the Royalty Exchange platform, and so on. So what we'll generally do is we'll answer the questions in a couple of ways. There are a number of questions that were left in advance when you registered, and so we address those first because we've got them here written out and it's easy for us to quickly get to. And then once we get through those, I will address any questions that you have live here during the call itself. There is, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see a number of options for typing in questions. The one I'd like you to please use is the Q&A button. The Q&A button on our end, that pops up a field that makes it very easy for us to monitor the incoming questions and to address them as needed. I would ask that you avoid using the chat feature. We can see the chats, but it's in a different box. It's harder to see, and it's likely that I'll miss your question, and I would hate to do that. So if you use the Q&A field, it makes it very easy for me to see your question, and we can address it immediately. I'll go ahead and answer the first question right now. Yes, there's going to be a replay of the event, and I will send it out to everybody afterwards. We send that out generally via the Marketplace Update email. This is our weekly email that basically updates you all on news on the platform, as well as new listings and things like that. So look forward in that communication. If you're not currently subscribing to the Marketplace Update, please update your email preferences so you are. And if you otherwise need to get the recording or have other questions, you could always email them to investors@royaltyexchange.com, and one of us will be monitoring that and definitely get back to you. So first things last, my name is Anthony Bruno. I'm the Director of Communications here at Royalty Exchange. I'm joined by Rob Bernard, he is our Chief Counsel, and Dayton O'Connor, who is our Financial Analyst, and we'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Let's see here, a quick bit of news that I wanted to start with is that there's been a couple of interesting changes to the marketplace that I wanted to quickly highlight for you all. First and foremost is if you go to, actually, I'm going to share my screen if that is okay with everybody. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So bear with me one second. Here we go. Is everyone seeing the Royalty Exchange homepage here? Rob, Dayton, let me know if I've got it right.
Got
okay.
it.
Okay, so what I want to show you is a quick update to the site. So if you go to listings, you'll see a couple of small changes. One, you'll see the name here at the exchange. We have renamed the secondary market as the exchange. And the reason we've done so is because we now have different types of listings available in what originally was created as a secondary market. The secondary market was where anyone who had acquired royalties on Royalty Exchange in the past could relist those assets and sell them to other investors who were looking for royalties and were just looking to acquire them in any way they can. So those secondary market listings still exist. You can still browse through the exchange and make offers to other investors for those assets. However, what we've added in recent months is what we call direct listings. And this is the ability for artists to directly list their catalogs on our exchange, where you can make offers to them directly. It's the exact same process as you would for making an offer to another investor. It doesn't look any different. It's just that you're making an offer to a songwriter or to an artist who owns the asset themselves and who are originally listing it. This has taken a lot of the momentum on the exchange now. Like, there's a lot more artists that are just directly listing their catalogs, which you can then browse and bid on as you like, outside of our, I guess, traditional auction process. We will still hold auctions, those will still happen, but because there's this other option for artists, you'll likely see somewhat fewer auctions as a result. Overall, you'll see more listings, okay? There will be more listings, more artists will be listing their catalogs on the exchange than might have otherwise participated in an auction. So on the whole, you're going to get more listings and more assets available for you to review. It's just that they're going to be mostly featured on the exchange now, and occasionally we'll have some highlight auctions on the auction house, all of which will be communicated as they are live. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight, and you're welcome to ask any questions as you go along. But basically, like I said, you hit the exchange and you'll see, once it loads, all the different assets that we have available to us. Okay, another thing I wanted to highlight that's also new, just today actually, is previously when you were in an actual listing itself, like this one here for Mac Miller and Wiz Khalifa royalties, there's this raw data file. Until basically this morning, the raw data file was only available to all access investor members, which is our paid premium membership. We have updated it so that now any investor who is registered and logged into the platform can now see this file. With this file, you download a spreadsheet of the entire earnings history that we have available, so you can run your own spreadsheet calculations and make your own assumptions, forecasts, things like that. This has always been available on the auction house, and because the auctions were short-term events that would then go away, and then the raw data file would go away. This on the exchange, they're kind of persistent, so they're there all the time, and we have to be a little careful about people coming in and sort of pulling our data for their own reasons that might not be particularly helpful to other investors. So there is a limitation to how many of these you can download in a given time frame. I think it's like, I believe it's 10. Rob, I don't know if you have that answer.
I don't know how many. I just
I believe
the tech team put their recaps on there
within a month. And then you'd have to do, then at each month it'll renew the time frame basically. So anyway, those are the two main changes that I wanted to let you guys know about, because they are, I think, pretty exciting and interesting. So there we go. With that, we're going to jump right into the questions now. Okay. So first question we have here is, can rights be actively managed, and who retains control over the rights, and how is control exercised? This is actually a repeated question throughout, so we're going to answer this once, and that should answer all the other versions of the same questions. But basically, as an investor on Royalty Exchange, you are essentially buying the right to collect revenue. You have the right to collect the royalties that the asset generates. By and large, you do not have the ability to control the copyright. Okay, you don't own the copyright. You're not actually managing. You're not trying to place the music that you bought in ads or films, things like that. You don't have the rights to negotiate those types of licensing or placements. You're investing alongside of those who do. So it's a passive investment. You're able to enjoy the revenue that this asset generates without actually having to do any work to ensure that it does generate revenue, because there are people involved who's equally financially motivated to do the same. So that's basically how that works. If there is a copyright involved, Rob, can you maybe help me out with that one? Is there any, in the few times that we do have a copyright that is included in the transaction, the owner does have some ability to make some licensing, correct?
Sure. So whoever owns the copyright would have the right to go out and license the music for further use, but those are very few and far between available on the Royalty Exchange platform.
Exactly. We consider that actually a benefit. So next question is, what is the initial investment? How long does it take to receive first payout from the initial investment? Good question. So the initial investment is basically the cost of the asset, right? You are buying a direct share of a royalty stream for a specific asset. You're not buying a share in a company. You're not, that kind of thing. You're actually buying an asset that you're owning yourself. So the initial investment is whatever the cost of that asset is, and that's it. The first payout is usually based on whatever the next distribution period is for that particular royalty stream of that particular asset. And that is listed very clearly in each listing that you'll see. It'll show first distribution date, and it'll mention it there, and you'll be able to see what the sequence of distribution will be, whether it's monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and so on. Anyone else got anything to add to that? Or I think that answers the question. All right. Are investments open to non-US citizens? And if so, are there any complications? Rob, you want to address that one?
Yes, they are. And one thing to consider is you'll want to look at Royalty Exchange is a withholding agent for US taxes. So you want to look at what the tax treaty is between your home country and the US to determine how much, if any, Royalty Exchange will have to withhold out of your payments for tax purposes.
Okay. All right, next question is I'm interested to hear about competitors in the space. Who are they, and what is your strategy to compete? Good question. It's an interesting way of looking at it, I guess. So I'm going to answer that question from the point of view of the investor, the folks that are on this call. So are there other platforms where you as an investor could go to buy music royalties? Yes, I believe there are. Um, I don't know that they do it in exactly the same way because many of them have altered their business models a little bit. Um, there's a couple, the only ones I really know of are actually overseas, and I'm not sure precisely what the ability for US investors are to participate in that. I'm thinking of things like, I think it's A Note Music, and there's another one. I unfortunately don't have all the names at my disposal, but the thing that's different about them and us is that a lot of companies have emerged to, not a lot, but a handful of companies have emerged that offer a similar idea, a market for trading royalties. The thing that most of them miss are actual royalties for you to buy and trade. It's a platform, but it's not filled with any actual assets. And I think what you'll find with us is that we have by far the greatest number of assets available for investors to review and buy and resell if they like on a somewhat liquid market in the secondary market. There's over 350 assets in the secondary market right now. I'm sorry, in the exchange right now. So I think that's what sets us apart, and that's how we plan to compete, is to continue to be the momentum of where these assets are available. The other competitors that I would point out, maybe, and I don't really consider them a competitor to be honest with you, are the music funds that you can buy shares of publicly. I'm speaking like Hypnosis in the UK, Brownhill Music, which also is, I believe, floated on the UK public markets. And there's one just last week in the US, a music acquisition fund that just launched on the New York Stock Exchange. You can buy shares of those companies, and your investment in that company is then spent on that entity buying music royalties, which then you can earn in the form of dividends, for instance. Again, I don't consider them competitors. I think that there's no reason why you couldn't do both. I actually bought some shares of the one in the U.S. last week myself just to see how it goes. So I think that's another option for you. Okay, next question. I'd love an overview of the dashboard and how to interpret the data points. I believe what you mean by dashboard is the actual listings, right? So I can kind of go over that really quick. Basically, the listing page will list, on the exchange anyway, it'll list the list price, which is the price that the seller is asking for the asset. You can make an offer at that. You can accept that list price and immediately buy it, or you can make an offer below that and see if they will accept. The other points of the data that are in there are going to be the dollar age, which is the basically how long the royalties that the asset earned last year have been earning royalties. And we put that there because the longer an asset has been earning royalties, the more stable it might be assumed to be, and therefore more valuable. So another data point, for instance, is the last 12 months of earnings and the 3-year earning trends. Those both speak to the amount of earnings that the asset has made over the last year and the 3-year average. And the dollar age would speak to, I guess I would call it the quality of those earnings. Okay. And so a higher dollar age is usually considered more valuable than a lower dollar age. Those are the main data points that are there. We also break down source of earnings. So you can see whether these royalties are coming mostly from streaming services versus, say, radio or sync licensing, things like that. And then and I'm going completely by memory here. I could, so if I miss any, I apologize. But we also list the breakdown of the catalog that's there. If there's multiple songs in the catalog, you'll be able to see which songs are earning, are contributing the most or at different percentages to the overall total. So, if one song is creating 40% of the earnings and the other 60% come from 30 other songs, you'll see that, and so on. So those are the different data points there. Now, how to interpret those is really kind of up to you as an investor. Like, certain things you're more interested in than others. We feel that we recommend anyway that the main data points worth noticing are $1 age, right? That's a very important stat that we've been educating our investors on for some time now. 2 is obviously the last 12 months earnings, because when you make a bid, you're bidding at a multiple of the LTM. And so that's going to dictate how much you're actually looking to spend to acquire the asset. And then we also recommend looking at the source of earnings to get a sense of whether the earnings are coming from stable, repeatable sources like online streaming, for instance. And I guess lastly, I think I'd point out maybe the trend rate. You'll see we do list a 3-year earnings history in a chart form, and you want to kind of take a look and try to get a sense of whether those earnings are increasing, decreasing, or most of them are decreasing a little bit, but at what rate are they decreasing? And these are things you want to pay attention to. So we're going to get a little bit more into the rate of decrease here in a little bit, but those are basically the main data points that I would look at. All right, next question. If non-members cannot see the analyst evaluations, could they still make an offer? Yes. So what that's referring to is our analyst benchmark, and all access investor members have the ability to see an analyst benchmark, which is a data point that basically says of other catalogs like this one, here's the median price that was paid, right? The median price meaning just as many catalogs of this type were bought for more than this as were bought for less than this. It's the median price point. It's just a general guide to give you a sense of about what other catalogs of the same dollar age and other factors have sold for. But you by no means should you only, if you even could see the analyst benchmark, only bid at or around the analyst benchmark. Some catalogs are worth far more than others within their benchmark range. But yes, you can still make an offer. How long of a process is purchasing royalties? I think what that means is how long does it take to actually buy one? And on our platform, it's just a matter of days. Rob, do you want to really quickly go through the transactional component of this?
Sure. So whether you have a offer accepted on the exchange or you win an auction, the closing process is essentially the same. We'll send out the purchase agreement, the accounting agreement right away. Then you'll have 2 days to sign the agreements and send the funds. Once we have all the funds, then we'll submit the assignment paperwork, if necessary, to whoever the royalty distributor is. Then once they confirm that the assignment is in place, then we release the proceeds to the seller and then begin accounting for your royalty income to you with that next distribution. So really, it's it could take as little as 2 days. It could take a week or two, but generally that's kind of the window.
And it's also worth noting that in many cases, you might, even if it takes 2 days or 2 weeks, you've acquired the asset, but you're still not going to collect that first royalty stream until whenever that next distribution date is. So if the next distribution is a month away, whether it takes 2 days or 2 weeks, it kind of doesn't really have any effect on how much you're going to earn.
Right, and if it wasn't clear, Royalty Exchange handles the whole transfer process between the buyer and seller, and then also with the royalty distributor.
Great, thanks, Rob. Next question. What's the update on product flow for the auction house? Great question. I kind of alluded to that earlier when we started the call, in that a lot of the product flow volume is landing in the exchange now, where artists are directly listing their catalogs with the price point that they'd hope to make, which you can then, again, either accept or make offers below. That is where most of the volume is now. So if you're looking for new assets, I would direct you to the exchange and to review what's available there using the filtering tools to see what's new and whatnot. And again, if you're not subscribed to receive our new listing alerts, either through the Marketplace Update weekly summary or the real-time alerts as they happen, please do update your email preferences so you're going to be able to get those and see when new assets are added to the platform. So you're going to see the most volume of assets on the exchange. There will still be auctions, right? We're not all types of royalty assets can be offered on the exchange. Generally, we are able to post catalogs that earn from public performance royalties from BMI or ASCAP, and as well as certain publishers, certain publishing assets with publishers that we have direct relationships with. Anything outside of that criteria is something that would become an auction. So that would include like sound recording royalties, non-music royalties like movies or trademark, things like that. So that's where things are. But the bulk of it at the moment is going through the exchange. I love this question. How do you find obscure artists and writers that are listed on the secondary market? So generally they find us, but we do a lot of outreach. So basically, how do we find artists to list their assets? And we do a lot of outreach to the music community. We're with a lot of partners that work with songwriters and let them know that this is an option, that a fair and equitable option for them to raise money outside of the more traditional channels of like advances or loans that they might otherwise see. A lot of the artists that have worked with us and have been pleased with their experience then tell their fellow co-writers and whatnot, and we have a lot of word of mouth traffic that comes our way as well. So we do advertising on social and other ways. We do a lot of press and PR. It keeps me busy. So, there's a lot of channels that we use to try to elevate awareness of this as an option for artists. And like I said, we're fielding calls pretty much daily from these folks. So that's kind of how that works. Next question is, do you have funds or ETF, and what is the minimum holding period? Rob, we have a lot of questions around this about partial ownership, fractional shares, things like that. So there's at least 5 questions in the list that speak to that point. Rob, do you want to just answer that all in one succinct answer here?
Sure. Yeah. Nothing on the platform would be considered a fund. Everything you see is a one-to-one transaction between a buyer and a seller of a single royalty stream. We have done 3 private placements, and those do have regulations on them where a holder would have to hold them for a year before they could transfer them, because they would be considered securities. But everything else on the platform that you see right now is a one-to-one transaction between buyer and seller. So no holding period. You could buy it and sell it the next day if you wanted to. So that's kind of how all that works.
Dayton, I promise we're going to get some questions for you here in a minute. Waiting patiently. In fact, this next one you might even want to chime in on. So the question is, what's the general return or cash flow like on average? So let me start with that one basically, which is it depends on how much you paid for an asset. I mean, any return on any investment depends on what you paid for it. So I'll just start with that. And that can skew results dramatically as you look at what's available. We've done some analysis in the past where we've seen, if you look at everything, the whole platform, and there's many different ways of acquiring royalties that change what the return might be, but on the whole, between 10 and 12% is what we've seen on average that people have enjoyed based on what we've monitored as part of our administration of ongoing payments to rights holders. But there are a number of factors that can change that. If you're buying a 10-year term asset, for instance, versus the life of rights asset, there's some differences there. If you're manually placing an offer, there's a little bit of a return difference than if you have, say, a standing order place where it's just sort of automatically places a standing order against catalogs that meet your criteria. That can actually increase your returns quite a bit. So that's sort of the general view. Dayton, I know I don't want to share any preliminary results that we haven't had a chance to actually, verify yet, but I know you're in the process of looking at this as well. Do you have anything else you want to add to that answer?
Not on that yet.
Not on yet, but you are. But the point is, he's actually doing a review of returns right now, and we hope to have some news by the end of the month.
Oh, yes.
See, this is me bugging him for returns so I can write that report. How are funds paid out? By check, debit, etc.? Robert, you want to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah. So we'll have any investor will sign up with our third-party partner, which is called Payment Hub. And through there, you can either select direct deposit for your payment, and if you prefer, you can also have us mail you a check.
Great. The next question is a very good one. How do I start purchasing royalties? It's very simple. You go to our site. You look through the exchange for assets that fit within your investment criteria. What you're looking to spend, what kind of assets you're looking to acquire, and you make an offer directly to the owner of that asset on the exchange. Or if there's an auction that fits those same criteria, you can register for the auction and watch or make a bid. It's basically that simple. There is a verification process, which we are in the process of trying to update and speed up here in the coming weeks, just to ensure that you understand that you have the funds necessary to acquire the royalty that you're making an offer on. Offers are considered binding. If you make an offer for something for $10,000, we expect that you will be able to pay $10,000 if that offer is accepted. If it's not a negotiation after that point, this is a real offer. So there is that caveat, but basically there's not much to it beyond that. It's just create an account with us on our website, review the listings that we have available, and make the offers on the assets that you are interested in, that you have the ability to purchase. Next question. Any information on how to best handle depreciation of assets on our taxes? Sort of. First of all, I guess that's what's the disclosure here, Rob, that we have to make before we start talking about this stuff?
So Royalty Exchange is not a tax advisor. We do not issue tax advice. You should consult your own financial advisor for your specific purposes.
There you go. So with that said, a couple years ago, we actually did write a report. We have an insights report that we send out every month on a different topic that is distributed to our all access investor members. That's our premium membership tier. I'm going to paste a link to one in the chat feature now for you all to see. That's from, I think, 2017, where we did a little examination of how that might work. So that is, whoops, I actually sent that to all the panelists who don't need it. Let's try panelists and attendees this time. There you go. So there's a link to a PDF report that we wrote in, 2018, that looks at the tax benefits of music royalties and sort of the appreciation, depreciation component of it and how that might work. So I'm going to point you to that. I'm also going to post that into our onto our investor blog so that it's available at all times for people to kind of go and review if they like. It's a very, very, very common question. Basically, there is some amortization schedules that you can rely on to apply to your royalty investment. But again, this is a guide. This is a place to start. This is something that you'd share with your tax advisor and ask questions and see what the right situation is for you based on what it is that you acquired and what your tax situation looks like. So I'll leave it at that. But that's something that I'm going to make more generally available to everybody here soon. It's just that I only have it in PDF form and it's going to have to retype it, the whole thing. So once I get to that, it'll be available to everybody. Next question is, and I'm going to correct the question here a little bit. Will the new MLC, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, permit assignments of mechanical royalties similar to public rights organizations like BMI and ASCAP do? Rob, I think you wanted to address that one.
Right. So what the Mechanical Licensing Collective is their job is to go out and collect the digital audio mechanical royalties from streaming services like Spotify. And then what they'll do is they'll collect the royalties from the platform and they'll pay those through to whoever either is the publisher or the administrator of that catalog. So they won't actually handle any assignments of royalties, direct assignments like ASCAP and BMI do. They'll just continue to pay those through to who the ultimate copyright holder or administrator is. And then the ultimate publisher or administrator would then handle any assignments that would happen for our purposes of publishing royalties. So really it becomes a part of the publishing contract. It's just money that the publisher receives and has to pay to the songwriter.
And I'm going to go ahead and also share a recent blog post that we published in January, early January, when it went live. That just is an overview of what the MLC is and how it affects or doesn't affect royalties. So I just shared that in the chat field as well. So moving on, Rob, you're on deck again. What happens if the bank wire transfer takes more than 2 business days? Can I see a purchase agreement before I make an offer?
Yeah, so if you initiate a wire, it should always either hit that same day or the next day. If there's an issue, we certainly want you to let us know right away. And we'll take a look at it as far as the timing concerns. On the sample purchase agreement, you can actually find those linked for review in our terms of use on the website. So you just navigate down to the bottom, click terms of use. The standard purchase agreements are linked there for your review.
All right, great. Well, this is a 3-parter, so we're going to have different folks addressing different questions here. So 1, how does Royalty Exchange charge transactions? Again, I'm going to answer that from the perspective of the investor. So with every transaction, or most transactions anyway, on the exchange, there is a 1% marketplace fee. That fee, so it's 1% with a $500 minimum, and that is a one-time fee charged at the close of the transaction that covers the costs, the administrative costs of us administering payment to you as an investor from the different royalty sources. So we take care of that for you. You pay for it with the, from the sale itself, 1%, like I mentioned, and that's it. Who owns Royalty Exchange? Royalty Exchange is a privately held company. That's the best way I can put that one. There's no parent company, if that's the question. And then finally, how does the collection and distribution of money work? Rob, you want to quickly take maybe that one? Let's talk a little bit about that and the administration process that I alluded to.
Sure. Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier, once the purchase is complete, we'll submit the assignment to whoever the distributor is. Royalty Exchange will then collect those royalties on the investor's behalf, and via our accounting agreement, we would then send those. Generally, it's a week to 10 days after we receive them is when we kick them out to whoever the investors are, and then you receive those payments like we talked about earlier through Payment Hub via either direct deposit or check.
Great. All right, Dayton, I think we're gonna start to roll you in here a little bit more. Next question here is, how do you know you're making a good investment when you have no experience or knowledge of music royalties? I'm gonna just quickly start off that one by saying it's an excellent question. We know we do have a number of guides available to you on the blog that I would point you to in the investor resources section. We talk a little bit about how we recommend or at least advise that you can, place value on royalties. The idea that we feel is that you don't have to know anything about music at all to make a smart investment decision in music royalties. Dayton, you want to throw a little color on that? I mean, Dayton does a lot of work with the incoming catalogs, and he looks at them, and could maybe speak a little bit more specifically as a financial analyst about how we kind of approach our valuation activities.
Sure. So we're primarily focusing on dollar age as our primary guide in valuing a catalog, with the understanding that the older that a catalog is, the longer that it's been accruing value and royalties, the more valuable it's going to be going forward. That's a very strong indicator of the returns in terms of future distributions and how consistent those distributions are going to be. I would also say a question about whether or not you are making a good investment. I think you need to understand what your investment goals are. You're approaching music royalties to, diversify your portfolio, look for yield, or look for an uncorrelated asset. Some mix there. So you need to, before diving in, make sure that buying a music IP asset aligns with whatever your broader investment goals are.
I think that's a great answer. All right, if there's any more on that, you can please type them in the Q&A, but I think that's about as perfect as answer as I could have done. So well done. Next question is, what is the minimum investment? We don't really, there really isn't a minimum investment, but typically like about the lowest I've seen is, around $5,000. I think we had an asset move on the exchange last week at $4,500. I mean, that's about as low as you'll see it go. And that one sold in 15 minutes after it was posted, because there's not a lot of them. On average, the average transaction on our platform is around 60,000. Again, you can, that's an average, so there's plenty below that. But I would say if you don't have around $5,000 that you're have available to spend on music royalties, I don't know that you're going to have much luck finding anything on our platform. Let's see here. Next question. How can royalty holders check that different formats are paying royalties? Like it mentions radio, but I think that that the sources that are supposed to be paying those royalties are actually doing so. Rob, how would we best answer that, do you think?
Yeah, I think the best information for that is going to be found in the raw data that you'll receive with each distribution. So depending on who the distributor is, you'll have different levels of line items on the royalty statement. It'll show where the royalties have come from. Sometimes you'll get play counts. Sometimes you'll get the underlying source. So the better the data is that you see on a listing, that's the kind of data you're going to see going forward. So you'll be able to track that and see, what trends have changed. If there's been any issues that way, that's something you can kind of follow along with. But generally, you're not really going to have any audit rights of the underlying distributor as the recipient of payments. So I think making sure you understand what those statements are and what you're seeing after you purchase it is important to keep in mind too.
So if you're monitoring them from distribution to distribution, and you see, say, a sudden drop in one source that was rather consistent in the month in the distributions prior, that might be worth a question at the very least. Right. But generally, I think it's worth noting that for most of the types of royalties that we make available, like songwriter royalties through PROs, I mean, these are well-established organizations with decades of history, and their sole job is to track, collect, and distribute those music royalties as they are owed. So they are financially obligated and incentivized to make sure they're collecting all the like they're the pit bull that go after the folks that are due, that are supposed to be paying the royalties, and they are regularly on top of making sure that those are being distributed. So it's from that perspective, at least from the PRO perspective, it's hard to see a lot of disruption going on there, just because these are very, very stable organizations that have been around for a long time. Okay, next question. Why no auctions? Mentioned that we still have auctions, but most of the activity is now on the exchange. And The rest of the question, I'm sorry, I don't understand it. There's a question about an extra BMI payment in November and something about requesting seller bid section for those sellers. I'm just not very clear on the question. So I'm going to move on to the next one here. Can entities own royalties, or does it have to be owned by an individual? I believe, Rob, that an entity can buy on our platform, correct?
Of course, yeah.
Right. So yes. So the short answer is yes, you can buy as an entity. Let's see here. What are the pay ranges to place a bid on a song? Does the bidder own the copyrights of the bought song? So I'm not sure what the pay ranges to place a bid on a song means. Basically, you can bid what you feel the asset is worth. I think it's worth, looking at the LTM, looking at the dollar age, and making I guess a realistic offer would be the best way to put it. There are some minimums. The people that are selling assets on our platform can put in a floor that automatically rejects anything below that. We've seen some rather interesting bids over the years and months here that don't really make a lot of sense. So it's worth making a real offer, otherwise you just might get ignored by the seller. And in terms of the copyrights, like I mentioned earlier, generally no, you do not own the copyrights. There are some caveats to that, but for the most part, the copyrights are not included. Talk about that. Let's see. How do you get paid when you buy a royalty for a defined term? As in, how do you monitor when payments are due to you? Good question. So for each listing, we note the type of royalty that is being acquired and who the royalty payor is, the distributor. And that also includes a schedule of when the next payment is due. And that schedule is usually fairly adhered to. I believe the only time that I can remember there being any disruption in payments was earlier this year, at the very early stages of the pandemic, when there was a little bit of a shuffle in exactly what date the distribution was going to be made, but it was still within the month time frame. Like the sequence was largely the same. So, Rob, do you have any other points to add to that? I think I covered that.
Yeah, just check the distribution schedule.
Yeah, it's there in the listing, and it'll be there, I believe, after you acquire it. Is it also in any of the paperwork that you receive?
It won't be in the purchase agreement. It'll just be in the auction listing or the
Okay.
exchange listing.
Another question is someone from Finland. Hello, Finland. I'd like to ask how to begin. I mentioned that earlier. Just go to the site and begin reviewing assets. How to target, that's kind of up to you based on what you're trying to achieve as an investor and what your investment strategies are. How do our royalties generate revenue? How cost works and allocation? But there's a lot of questions there. I would point you to our I'm getting this wrong. Our investor resources guide in our blog. There's a lot of information there that kind of gets everything started step by step, that explains how to review a listing, different data points that you should review to develop a valuation for a listing, a little bit about how royalties work and how they're distributed and things like that. The answer to that question would take the bulk of this call plus another half an hour probably. So I will point you to the investor resources section of the blog to answer most of those questions.
I'll put a link in the chat.
By the way, actually, yeah, you can put the link in the chat, but I actually today, probably tomorrow and the next day, I'm going to be updating all of those with some more updated guides that are a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to understand. So I'm in the process of doing all that right now as well. So I think you'll enjoy it. Let's see. And as an investor, is it better to buy catalogs that you have an interest in or known genres that make money? Dayton, you wanna try to grab that one? Want me to read it again?
No. I'm just kind of contemplating it a little bit. I think it's interesting because I know that there are a lot of investors that are drawn to the platform because they have an emotional connection to a song or a track. I joined recently, but before I came on, I heard stories about people buying songs, to give to their children, or buying songs to themselves because they have a connection with the artist. And if you're purchasing on that level, you're evaluating it in a different way, I think, than somebody who's trying to come on, who's trying to drive value. So I would say maybe if you're coming on seeking a certain kind of genre or a certain kind of asset, keep an open mind, because there are many different types of music IP that are available on the platform. And I think that you'll find that, case by case, you need to evaluate a given auction, a given bid. there are some rules about genres, but I think that you'll want to take a look at any kind of asset, even if you don't necessarily have that kind of emotional connection to that would have driven you to the platform in the first place,
I
if
think
that's why you're coming here.
right. That's a great question. I mean, it's like when you look at investing in general, I mean, there's plenty of people I know. I invest in companies that I don't necessarily use or have a personal connection to. I invest in them based on their earnings and their potential. That's how I invest. I mean, I'm an avid skier. I don't own Vail stock. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the best way that I would kind of put it in a story. Moving on. How is money distributed from the streaming services? Is it directly to me or through publishing companies to me? So yeah, it is not, the streaming service does not pay you directly. If you buy an asset, you are getting paid through some form of distributor, depending on the type of royalty that you've acquired. A publisher, if it's a publishing asset; a PRO, if it's a public performance asset; a distributor or a label, if it's a sound recording asset. That's generally the highlights there. We've talked a lot about assessing and valuing assets already, so I'm going to skip past those. Here's a good one. What are recommended post-purchase considerations? Dayton, you want to maybe grab that one again?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what are your investment goals? So it's a question about how long are you willing to hold this particular asset? If you're going to hold it for the entire term, are you interested in potentially reselling it? Do you have a certain target return that you're seeking before you sell that asset? I think those are very important points for you to consider.
Great. Here's one of my favorite questions. Are the earnings tax-free? I don't believe there's any earnings in this country that are tax-free. So I'm going to go ahead and say no. But on joking aside, we send, I believe, some tax forms to folks, Rob.
Yeah. For every single thing that Royalty Exchange distributes, we'll send you a 1099 MISC for. It's considered income. Royalty income is considered income, personal income. So
there you go.
Come on.
Okay, let's see. There's a question about what about music licensing collecting via AR streaming services? I'm really not sure what that means. We're assuming that means augmented reality streaming services. And I guess the easy way to answer this question is that any service that uses music has to license music. And if you own a royalty that benefits from that licensing, you will earn from it. That's the best way I can answer that question. Now, I'm not really sure exactly what the question was driving at there. There's another question here related to the theoretical IRR calculation and a 10% discount rate and that sort of thing. I guess the short answer is no, the IRR is not the expected return for the asset class, okay? It's a theoretical IRR that's meant to, we place that in our auctions, and the idea of it is to note the potential impact of a bid on the potential for returns. So a lot of other factors go into it. We're not saying this is going to be the return if you buy it. We're just saying that obviously the higher, the more that is bid for an asset and the higher that is paid for an asset, you'll see the IRR calculation somewhat decrease. And it's meant to be a guide for that activity more than anything else. If there's any other questions about theoretical IRR, I actually might have to do a little extra research on that for you. So please send them to investors@royaltyexchange.com and we'll make sure we get a good answer for you. Another great question. How do I sell it? Do you sell through the portal, and how long does it usually take to sell it? It's a fantastic question. Yes, the exchange allows you to list most any asset you've acquired from the platform there, and other investors can make you offers directly for those assets that are unable to be listed on the exchange. For instance, if they're sound recording royalties or for other types of assets, then you could actually hold an auction yourself and sell it that way. In terms of how long, it really depends on what you price it at. If you bought something for 5x LTM and you've owned it for 2 years and now you want to sell it for 10x LTM, it might take a little longer to get someone to take that list price seriously. But so if you're an aggressively priced but fair that offers you a return, list price will move quickly generally. Could artists redirect their streaming royalties or change their distribution and therefore defeat the collection process? Rob, you want to address that one?
Yeah, no, there's certainly a possibility that there's going to be bad actors anywhere, and if a seller wanted to meddle and attempt to meddle with the royalty stream that they had sold, they could try. A lot of the times these things are irrevocable, so there's really nothing they could do about it. But when Royalty Exchange is the administrator, we have direct access and contact into the ultimate distributor, so we'll know if anything is going on. Ultimately, the purchase agreement that you sign with them obviously is binding. It's dated. It's the record that the transaction has taken place. So that's really what's going to guide any sort of issue that would happen in the future. But I suppose there is a possibility that we have some bad actors.
Okay, but we stay pretty much on top of that, and it's not by any means a common occurrence. How many auctions can one bid on? As many as you like. Simple answer. In what form do I hold the rights? Rob, jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but basically you hold the right to collect income from a royalty source, and that is the sole form in which you hold the right. So you have the right to collect whatever portion of the royalty stream that was made available on the site. It's not copyrights, etc., that we've mentioned earlier.
Right. So it's governed by the purchase agreement. There isn't like a title document for these things. It's an income right that's handled by a purchase agreement. And
the next question is also a really very good one, which asks what are some of the changes in 2021 in royalty collection in the U.S. and whether you have to register to collect them. So I'm going to jump past a lot of that and just get right to the bottom line, which is that you don't have to do anything. What we do is we work with the distributors to whether it's a letter of direction or other agreements that is going to redirect the payment from the person who sold the asset to you as a new owner. It's that simple. All of that is handled in the closing paperwork, and you don't have to register or really do anything. That's one of the benefits of our platform. All right, that same answer goes to the next question, which is how to ensure timely payment from publishers, distributors, etc. Again, they pay at regular intervals. We administer those payments. We'll advise if there's any delays or other interferences with those, which I don't believe has really ever happened. So that's part of the service that we provide as Royalty Exchange. Another question is, can my music publishing company buy these catalogs outright? I guess there's two answers to that. Sure, you could always buy catalogs outright, but in terms of what you can buy on our platform, you can only buy what is being offered. And if it's what is being offered is only a percentage of a royalty stream, then that's all you can buy from us. If you want to buy more than that, that's up to your publishing company and your normal, negotiation and sales and acquisition processes. Let's see here. So how to invest in royalties in a low income? Wouldn't recommend it. It's something that you should do to diversify a broader portfolio. And if you're not already investing across other areas, I don't think this is an area that you should start with. And no, investors do not have the permission to license songs. Dayton, I'd love you to address this one. There's a question related to what a realistic decline in revenue as song ages might be.
I think that's something that has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. At a certain point, if a song has been earning royalties for a significant period of time, it's going to reach a steady state. And I'm thinking of evergreen titles, songs and tracks that have enduring appeal that might have been placed in, certain films or TV shows or on regular rotation on the radio. There's always going to be an audience for that content. And after a certain period of time, it's always going to maintain a certain amount of consumption and a certain amount of performances, a certain level of distributions. A realistic decline in revenue, if we're talking about more recent singles, the typical contour of that is release, quick peak about 3 to 6 months out, and then likely a quick decline thereafter, probably reaching its steady state in about 1 to 2 years worth of time if we're talking about radio performances. Probably expect to see a similar kind of contour if we're talking about streaming on a similar schedule, but probably popping a little bit quicker than we would on radio. But again, like if we're talking about decline in revenue, eventually it's going to reach its steady earnings, probably in about 3 to 5 years time, depending on the track, but it's something that you have to look at on a case-by-case basis.
Great, thank you. Kind of on that same note, this is an interesting question. Are there any restrictions in sync for a song apparent in the listings? For instance, are there easy clears that an investor would know about, or restrictions that an investor might know about when they're trying to acquire an asset? So like, okay, I'm going to buy this, it's earning a lot from streaming, but you should know that the owner, the person selling it, has restricted certain songs from ever being licensed for anything.
Yeah, no, that information is if it's anywhere, it'll generally be like in a publishing or label agreement. Sometimes the ultimate songwriter has the ability to deny uses that are like used in like X-rated things or profane stuff. But ultimately, it's the publisher who has the full licensing authority to go out and issue the sync licenses. One thing to note is that oftentimes there's going to be more than one songwriter, so that means there's more than one publisher. And if you want to sync a song, you have to get permission from each one of those publishers who hold a copyright interest. So that's one thing to keep in mind, but there won't be any, we won't have the information like that posted in the listing.
And yeah, and generally you can see like if there's a history of sync licensing, that's the indication of whether or not certain songs are available for sync. In some cases, you won't see any sync income. In some cases, you see a lot of sync income. So that's sort of a hint, I guess you could say, in terms of the activity around the catalog, but certainly not guaranteed to in any way repeat. That's one of the reasons why we de-emphasize sync as a source of royalty income, and we prefer to look at more regular and predictable streams like our income streams like streaming. All right, last question that was left in advance I want to get to, because some of these other ones you've already addressed, which I thought was interesting. Basically, is the letter of direction that we set up to redirect payment from a PRO to the investor, is that letter of direction public? And I don't actually know the answer to that, Rob.
No, these are private transactions. So the letters of direction are handled by the buyer and seller, and then whoever the ultimate distributor is.
Okay, so I know there's a lot of questions in the Q&A field. I know we're kind of getting late in the call here, but I'm going to try to roll through these as quickly as, but also as fully as we can here. So first question, are all sellers able to buy back their assets, and can you opt out of that if you're buying something? In certain auctions, there is a buyback clause that mentions that the seller has the option to buy it back after a certain period of time for a set percent return, like a 25% more than what it was sold for instance. Those are not very common. They're listed, they're clearly listed in the auction when that happens, but it's very, very rare. Rob, I don't believe, is that?
We don't really do those anymore.
Okay.
We had a few of those for a while, a couple of years back, but I wouldn't expect to see any more of those on the marketplace. But if there are, it'll always be listed. Otherwise, there will be no affirmative buyback.
The one thing I will point out is that we do have a type of asset called a 10-year term, or sometimes 20, sometimes even 30, and so that's listed in the listing as well. So you'll know right away whether you're buying it for life of rights or whether you're buying it for a limited term, and then you can adjust your offer strategy in accordance with that. And then once those terms end, it's an automatic reversion back to the seller. So there are plenty of temporary sales available. There's a question here about songs deleted or moved from the platform or source that you're collecting royalties from. I think we addressed that one already, so I'm going to move on. What have investors done in the past to sweat their assets? In other words, looking for tech platforms that help identify when a song is played, but if a royalty is not paid. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what resources investors might have to independently track what they've acquired. Rob, do you know either you guys?
There's one service called Chartmetric that we've looked at that tracks a lot of streaming activity and how many playlists they're on. So that'll give you a little more insight than the actual what you're seeing on the statements in kind of a more real time. I think that's a paid service, but there is some cool data in there if you're interested in just following along with what's going on with something that you've bought. I don't know that you can create your own playlists. I think it's like a song by song or artist by artist platform, but there's some interesting stuff in there.
Okay, this is a great question. What happens when you purchase royalties for a song on Royalty Exchange, and then the catalog gets acquired by Hypnosis? That's a really interesting question. So I guess I'm going to try to make it a little bit more specific. Let's suppose a songwriter sells a portion of their public performance royalties to an investor on our platform, and then later the publisher or the songwriter who owns publishing sells the publishing catalog to Hypnosis. My assumption is really nothing changes. I mean, the money's still going to flow to whoever owns it no matter what. Whether Hypnosis ownership results in more plays, which then generates more income from that royalty asset, is kind of up in the air, and who knows. But it wouldn't change anything in your ownership structure of the actual asset. All right. I'm glad someone brought this up. There's an investor here who said they signed up and was required to have a call with one of our reps before they can be verified to invest, and the schedule of that verification call is several weeks out now, which the person rightfully says doesn't make sense, and why would one have to wait so long? You're absolutely right. This is a problem that just popped up in January because of the volume of investors that have been coming through to our platform. I can tell you right now that we are addressing this. We addressed this actually yesterday as something that needs to be fixed. Today, we're having a meeting to adjust our verification process so that you can get verified the same day that you register if you choose to. And we're going to have a solution for this by hopefully the end of the week. And I would like to apologize for anyone who's been affected by this process. It was sort of an unexpected rush of new investors. We've had a lot more investors joining the platform than we've ever seen before. The interest is at an all-time high. This is not me being PR spin, buzz, hype kind of guy here. This is a problem that happened very, very, very quickly, that we were caught a little bit flat-footed on, I'll be honest, and we are going to fix in very, very short order. So if there aren't any other questions on that, please let us know via investors@royaltyexchange.com. But we are addressing this, and it is going to be fixed very, very soon. Another question here: as more music moves to platforms like Spotify, are royalty streams more likely to be captured and paid, or has this been offset by lower margins on these platforms versus older mediums? That's a really good question. So, I mean, I guess what we're getting at is that, streaming services pay generally less per stream than, say, a sale did, right? The difference being that a sale was a one-time payment, whereas a stream is an ongoing lifetime payment. So I personally think that whether you're a songwriter or an investor that are buying song assets, you're going to make more over the lifetime of that song by virtue of regular use, assuming, of course, the song does get repeated use, than just the one time upfront. As an investor, I don't know why you would want to buy rights to a song that only earns money when someone initially buys it, but not for repeatedly playing it over time. That would be less of an interesting, that the asset wouldn't make any returns for you. You would just get a one-time payment when the song was bought, and that would be it. Again, this is for repeated use over the lifetime of the song, so it's a much different economic structure involved. And so yeah, while I would say overall that you're seeing more lifetime revenue opportunity from streaming than you did from older platforms.
And you get transparency, as far as play counts, and it's all out there for you to see, rather than if it was on the radio.
Yes.
In any market other than yours, you wouldn't really know, right?
Right. How does Royalty Exchange make money? We take a percentage of the sale paid for by the seller, and we have a small administrative fee that the buyer obviously pays in the marketplace fees for the administration costs that we mentioned earlier, 1%. Question: who tends to be the seller, the original artist or artist agent, and what are the key drivers for an artist or agent to sell versus hold the stream of income? So the answer is both. We work with the songwriter, we work with producers, we work with managers, anyone who earns royalties from their contribution to a song or a catalog can make them available on Royalty Exchange. Now, why would they do that? There's a number of different reasons. First and foremost, I think, is the flexibility that we offer them. They can sell just a percent, they can sell 25% of their royalty income rather than all of it. And I can think of a number of people who have had that opportunity to say, okay, you want to buy 10 years worth of 25% of my income, so I can get that up front. Yet I can still continue to make regular income on the other 75%. I mean, that's a great deal. So there's a lot of reasons why people would want to do that. The funding model in the music industry is a little bit antiquated. The terms for advances and loans are rather onerous for many artists, and it puts them in debt. They lose their rights. All of these things are just kind of chaff at artists sometimes. And so what they look for are ways to raise money with what they've reported and music that they've made in the past, to raise money to create new music, which then they can retain the rights of and collect all the revenue from in the future. So if I sell the songs that I've already written, raise money, use that to record and release new songs, any money those new songs make, I collect completely, and the investor only collects on what I wrote in the past. That's a disruptive model for how music is funded in this industry, and that's probably one of the main reasons they would come to us. Question here: do you break out what the margin is on radio versus streaming, et cetera, in order to get an idea of if an artist is likely going to face margin expansion or compression? We break out how much of the royalties are earned from different sources: 65% streaming, 20% radio, et cetera. And we show that over the history of the song. That's what we show. I don't know, Dayton or Rob, if there's another way of answering that question that I'm missing. They're not chiming. Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So yeah, you can see the percentage breakdown of source of royalties to get a sense of where that is. And it's also worth looking at that with the dollar age in mind. Okay. So like a song that's got a dollar age of 2, you're going to generally see perhaps more from radio than that would be over time. So radio has this thing where it's like it's a lot up front for a song that gets played on radio. It shrinks after 3 or 4 years, but a song that has lasting power, you'll see, will start to increase again in the latter ages of its lifespan if it's one that has gotten a regular radio airplay. So you'll see all these things available. What is the minimum investment? Again, it depends on what on what you're buying, but generally figure around 5,000. And can you walk us through how to make the investment on the site? The process is a little confusing. I guess the best way I can put it is that if you see an asset that you like, you make an offer for what you want to pay for it. If there's an auction, there's a current bid price, and there's a minimum degree over that price that you would have to spend. Like, so the minimum increment might be $1,000, for instance. The next highest bid in that auction would have to be $1,000 beyond what the current open bid is. That's basically it. I mean, if you're looking to invest in Royalty Exchange, or if you're looking to invest in like a music fund or something like that, that might be why it's confusing, because that's not what we offer, and there's no way to do that on the site. What we offer is the ability to look for assets that you buy outright and offer the amount that you wish to pay for it. There's a long question here, so bear with me for a second. What kind of security or contractual rights do purchasers of royalty streams get to protect them in the event of non-payment, even if an unlikely event? Rob, I want you to grab that one. Can you see the Q&A for the rest of that question?
Yeah, I've got it. So it's a contractual right between the buyer and the seller. So if there's any issues with non-payment, if for some reason the seller receives a payment after the effective date of the assignment, it's the seller's responsibility to make the buyer whole. And there's a provision, and you can see this in the sample purchase agreements that are linked in our terms of use. But essentially, if the seller or someone on the seller's behalf receives any payments that are otherwise due to the buyer, then the seller has to pay those to the buyer immediately, and then everything after 15 days accrues at 2% per month interest. To bake in a little bit of penalty for non-performance of that obligation.
All right, I hope that answered the question. If not, you're always welcome to send an email to investors@royaltyexchange.com for greater clarity. Next question is, how do you get new royalties from artists, and is it possible that artists give you only 50% of royalties? So the new royalties come from artists who, there's a lot of ways we do it. We do a lot of marketing. They come to us. There's a lot of word of mouth. They come to us and they offer what it is that they want to make available. And yes, that could be only 50%. Okay, let's see here. Upon purchase, is the royalty paid to the owner on the date of the next distribution, similar to a dividend from a company, or is it a prorated portion of the ownership period since the last payment? Robert, you're not even. Why don't you go ahead and take it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that the assignments are structured is that the investor is entitled to receive all royalties that are paid after the assignment date. So that's based on payment rather than accrual. So it's regardless of when the earnings were derived. So it's you're seeing everything that has been paid before the sale. You're seeing those in the listing, and you're entitled to 100% of everything that happens after the sale. So there's no proration.
Okay. Another question about beginner low-income investors buying royalties. Again, I do not recommend it. Royalty is an alternative investment. And alternative investments generally should be, I can't remember exactly now, I think between 5 or 15% of your overall investment portfolio. So, keep that in mind. If you don't have money to basically lose, you shouldn't invest in anything as a low-income earner. So I don't want to get into any alternative platforms and things like that. That's not our place. I can't recommend investment strategy to people, but beginner investors, low-income investors, I would focus on maybe income before trying to get involved with royalty investing. Here's a good question. Do you have any data on royalty trends in, say, Latin, Christian rock, et cetera, versus R&B and that kind of thing? Dayton, do we have, I don't know. I mean, is genre really something like, that kind of goes back to that genre question from earlier.
I mean, I can speak anecdotally to my experience with certain kind of genres, not to, get too long-winded in my response. There's certain genres that you typically expect to see higher contribution from streaming, i.e. R&B and hip hop, and then pop to a certain extent. And there are certain genres where you typically expect to see foreign royalties make up a larger portion of the contribution, such as electronic and pop music. If we're talking about like whether you should apply that to any particular opportunity that you see on the platform, I would say look at the data that you see for that particular asset first before you then start to apply rules of thumb about genres in your understanding to how you value the asset.
And just real quickly, I'd love to point people to, I guess I would look at sources like Nielsen, MRC, and other data organizations. I think Nielsen's the big one. Chartmetric might be another one. And they tend to report on broader genre-like trends in the music business more than we do. And if that's something you're interested in, I would point you to those sources: Chartmetric, Nielsen, MRC, Billboard, right? Read these things. If you get the marketplace update, I do include links to third-party news and research as we see them from week to week. Then I would recommend keeping an eye on that as well, because I do know that folks are interested, and I like to share what I find with you. Are royalty investments recession-proof? I think so. I can't show you data that proves that. I've been trying. But generally what we'll point out is that, one, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that people listen to less music in a recession than otherwise. During the pandemic, when things were going haywire across the board, we saw a very, very short, very, very brief dip in streaming activity, which the analysis that I read attributed more to a shift in behavior from commuting listening to at-home listening. But after, I think it was maybe just a couple of weeks, that dip went away and streaming actually began to increase quite a bit. And there were some other studies that also showed that people were actually subscribing to more music and entertainment services during the pandemic than decreasing them and cutting costs, for instance. So there seems to be, that's a behavioral anecdote based on some reports that I've read. But what's also worth noting is that the underlying rates that royalties are due, right? If you stream a song, the streaming provider has to pay X% for the stream of that song. That rate doesn't change based on recessions, stock market, anything else. That rate is a constant. So the use might change. And again, I don't see any evidence that it does based on recession or other types of things. And the rate doesn't change. So those are indicators to me that make me feel that royalties are recession proof. But I've yet to see a definitive report that says one way or another whether it is. All right, can you expand on not owning the copyright? I understand that if we are buying rights to income stream, but if the term is lifetime and the original copyright owner wants to sell their copyright later, how would that impact me as an investor? Would they try to buy their income rights back from me?
Yeah, so, right. So if you're buying the right to a specific royalty stream for the life of the copyright, that right is set in stone at the moment that the seller sells it to you. So you are entitled to that income regardless of who actually owns the copyright. So if we're talking about a songwriter, usually they have already assigned their copyright to a publisher. So if they wanted to terminate that assignment after a certain number of years and resell a portion that they still have and collect income, your claim to the original income that they sold you is still valid. So regardless of who the copyright owner is, the owner of the income stream would not change.
Great. I think that's perfect. Let's see here. This is, how do I know I bought the rights of a song after an auction? Do I get some kind of a certificate? Is there a royalty rights update on ASCAP? Do I need an account on ASCAP as an investor? No, you don't need an account. I don't. It's not listed on ASCAP. You get basically you get a purchase agreement and a contract essentially.
Right. So it's the contract is again what controls and that's your proof of ownership from seller to buyer.
Yeah. Anecdotally, someday I'd love to have real cool, well, stock certificate, something like that. But it's not with the volume that we do. It's just not at the moment feasible. Let's see here. Just to clarify, do you have to be an all access member to bid or buy? Absolutely not. You do not. An all access member just affords you certain benefits that other members don't have. They get weekly insights reports that we do some analysis and research around. You don't have to pay marketplace fees. The 1% fee that we mentioned for administration is waived for all access investors. You get some access to other types of investments, priority access like with our private syndicates, and that sort of thing. But you do not need to be a paid all access member to bid or buy anything on Royalty Exchange. Absolutely not. I want to make that very, very clear. The last question I'll get to that did come in through via the chat, which is, why don't we have a section on the exchange that lists catalogs in which the owner has asked for offers, which will narrow down who the willing sellers are. There's 347 catalogs, and it'd be nice to know which ones are really for sale. Totally get it. I would like to see that as well. It is something that we're discussing and looking at. Generally, the indication that if someone's trying to sell a catalog is when either they have set a list price, right? If they have a list price set, that's one way of knowing whether or not they're actually trying to sell something, because they've mentioned what price that they would accept for it if you were to buy it. The other indication is at what level did they set that list price. If the list price is in the stratosphere, they probably just set it just to see if someone would offer them something that high, but it would take basically anything is for sale on the marketplace if the price is right. Okay. And so if it's a really, really high list price with a very, very high multiple, that person probably is more inclined to keep it. But if you want to offer them 20x, then they might consider it, right? And that's sort of the indicator that they're signaling with the list price on the marketplace. I am working on, we are all working on some kind of a way to maybe better highlight catalogs within the 350 or so that are in the exchange, and to be continued on where that actually stands. But there's a lot of technical factors in the back end involved in that as well. But I do hope to make that a little bit more clear in short order. But thank you for your comment. I agree with you 100%. It's just a factor of the newness of the exchange at this point. And I think there's one last quick question, then I'm going to end this. What happens if songs are deleted or moved from the platform or source from which you are collecting royalties? I think we've mentioned that. I think we've addressed that already. But basically, you are acquiring the right to collect the income, whether it's on Spotify or not. That's how I'm interpreting the question. Rob, is there anything?
Well, I guess if the question is what if they're just deleted and you can't find them anywhere, then the answer is there would be no royalties because they're no longer being licensed.
Okay. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope we answered all of your questions. We went a little bit over, but we always try to answer every question that we get. Again, if you have any questions, you're always able to send them to investors@royaltyexchange.com, and we'll see if we can track down the answer for you. We hold these every month, so you're more than welcome to register for as many of these as you like. We have several return guests over and over again, which we're always happy to see. There will be a replay of this recording sent out later today, so please look for it in the marketplace update. And with that, please have yourselves a great day, and thank you for joining. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.